Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Can you first tell us about your background? What made you decide to study cinema and attend the film school?
Well, I always I grew up watching movies after school. I also had a art of the film teacher in high school who taught the art of the film from silent films through the 30s and 40s. And so it was also a time back in the 70s and early 80s where they had revival theaters in New York City where they would play 35 millimeter prints of all
Yeah.
these movies you'd see on TV. So we would go, and sometimes the directors would introduce them, like Frank Capra, Billy Wilder, Cary Grant, Alfred Hitchcock were there. Um, so,
So,
so I got very, very enraptured in storytelling.
okay.
My film teacher also taught English literature, and I was introduced to Dickens and many other authors that sort of, I think, lit a fire for storytelling. And from there, uh, I wanted to go to film school. I wanted to learn more. So I went to NYU uh, for 3 years. And in between semesters, I would go to Los Angeles to sort of learn the business side, try to figure out what's going on out there at the same time, which is why I left because I realized
Mm.
having a degree was less important than actually getting your foot in the door. And while I was in New York, I worked on, like I said, production assistant on an after school special TV show that did a series of things. And through that, I made my own film at NYU that got some notice and got put on television, actually. So,
Wow.
yeah. And from that, Roger Corman and his New World Pictures uh, saw it on television or in the TV guide or something and reached out and said, if you're ever in Los Angeles, we'd love to meet you. So of course I flew right out there. So
Yeah,
and
can imagine.
yeah, I was like, I think I'm going to be there tomorrow. And so that's sort of how that all evolved. In the meantime, I was working for a another writer who was writing for musicals for Broadway, a very famous Broadway librettist named Michael Stewart, who wrote Bye Bye Birdie, Carnival, Hello Dolly, 42nd Street. I mean, all these big, great musicals. So I got to watch another artist in at work. He got me a job as a production assistant on the movie Annie. That's started out with Finney, and uh, when I got there, it was shot in New Jersey, so it wasn't far from me. I'm from New Jersey. Um, the director's assistant, John Huston's assistant, died, and so they needed somebody to kind of be a liaison between the production side and him. And so I just jumped in, and so I learned quite a bit of what it took to make a movie and how to tell a story. And I became very friendly with the um, screenwriter, Karol Sobieski, who had written one of my favorite movies called Casey's Shadow. So I was kind of learning how a writer navigates the world of having your script
Hmm.
reimagined by other people. So
Yeah.
I learned that quite early. And after that, I ended up in LA and I got introduced to a producer uh, named Donald Borchers, who worked for New World Pictures. And
Okay.
he showed me a poster of a movie that I thought was very cool. And he said, I need a movie to go with the poster. Like they had an actual poster and an advertising campaign and no movie. And he said,
That's crazy.
I know, right? I'm like, is this how it works? And he said, so if you can write me a movie called Vamp that has
Hmm.
strippers, college kids, and vampires in it, you can direct it. And I did, and I did. So that was my sort of entrance into writing
Okay.
a movie and getting it made.
Wow. Okay.
It never happened
So
again like that either. So
a lot of experiences that
what's
led you
that?
to. a lot of experiences after one another.
Yeah,
You found your way.
just sort of navigating it in from the bottom up, learning how it
Yeah.
works, and which I think is very helpful to writers to understand the process. I think I was lucky to direct my own first film, to work on films with the other writer, to see that, you cannot be precious, and you understand that, the more collaborative you are in this business, the more
Yeah.
the more you're involved.
Mm.
So I think I learned that early on subliminally. So I wasn't too precious about anything.
Yeah, it's great. And in your directing career, you worked in various different genres, like fantasy with vamps, horror with witchcraft, and romance with just the tickets.
Mhm.
What were you thinking at the time? Was it a desire to explore different type of movies?
No, I like just good stories or good characters.
Mm.
Uh, Wishcraft was a job that I took on. They had a script that didn't really make any sense, so I sort of and it was just strictly a directing job, so which I never had
Okay.
before. So, but I ended up rewriting the material with the actors and kind of creating this whole kind of cool movie. I was unaware at the time that the original author was also the head of the company. So
Mm.
by the time the movie was over, I was fired, and
Wow.
yeah. But again, learning the process of taking a piece of material and translating it to screen is important to understand.
Mm.
As a writer, you don't work in a vacuum. You're writing
Yeah.
a piece of material that someone has to write a check for, that some actor wants to be in, that some marketing guy has to figure out how to market it and who's going to buy tickets, and all these things that go into seeing your creation actually produced. So I
Yeah.
think it's important to not be so literary. I think it's called show business for a reason. So.
Yeah.
So you kind of learn that as you kind of move up and see and experience. And I got lucky with who I worked with and saw work, and their attitudes and their approaches were something I mirrored.
Yeah. It feels like it's really the right time and the good person in the right time. So a lot of luck, but also a lot of motivation for the job. So
I also wanted to experience people that were better than me or more experienced than me.
mm,
It's the old adage that an athlete says, if you want to get better, you play against people that are better than you. So, try to hitch your wagon to somebody who's done it, who you admire and you want to be like, and see how they do it. And I think that was very helpful to me.
you haven't directed a movie since 2002. Do you
Mhm.
plan to return to directing one day, or is it a chapter that is
Um,
definitely closed?
I don't, yeah, eventually maybe I'll direct something that's very personal, or, a small movie that I write, but it's a very, very long process to write and direct. Um, for example, just the ticket, which was originally called The Scalper, which was originally a movie that Andy Garcia and I wanted to make as sort of a John Cassavetes type movie. Um, I want to say it took 8 to 10 years to get made.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
trying to raise the money, cast the movie, find the right budget. No one would believe we could do it, all that stuff. So it's a lot of work. And if you want to have a career, I think I decided that it's a long and by the way, once you actually shoot the movie or write the movie and shoot the movie, it's 3 years. And
Hmm.
so it's a lot of time to put into one project. Um, I just thought maybe writing movies for people I liked and directors I
Hmm.
liked, and being a part of the process. And then when I got older and tired of writing, I'd maybe find a project that I'd love to direct.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds
Yeah.
a good plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the writing. So in 2016, the remake of The Magnificent Seven, directed by
Mhm.
Antoine Fuqua, was released, which I
Mhm.
really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And how do you approach writing the remake of such a classic film? What are the things to look out, and what are the liberties that you can take on this?
On that particular one, you know, I was very familiar with the original. Again, it was one of the movies when I was growing up and after school, they would have something called the $1 Million Movie that would play the same movie at 4 o'clock every day. So I remember The Magnificent Seven, The Great Escape, and Moby Dick as three movies that I remember watching over and over again, and remember images and scenes and things. So I was well aware of the movie. Um, when I was approached, there was a screenplay by a really well-known screenwriter who doesn't get credit for it on the movie. That I just thought the movie was a different kind of movie. I don't know what it really was, and it was also Denzel was in it. And I had just worked with Denzel on The Equalizer, so and I was actually readying Equalizer 2 at the same time. So, and I writing Jack Reacher at the same time. So I was like, they wanted me to come in, and I didn't know, and I read it, and I thought, oh, I see what's wrong. It's a couple years after the Civil War, and you have to address the fact that there was a whole relationship between Denzel's character and Chris Pratt's character that was not realistic because he was black and he was white, and they were fighting over a woman, which was not going to be realistic, and they had a past, and I don't know how that. So I had to kind of deconstruct it. But the fun part is that I got to work one-on-one with each actor, each of the seven, right? So, so by taking that out, well, I already had worked with Denzel, so we worked together. But Chris, I had never worked with, and I met him, and I had to go to his house to explain that I was taking his whole character out of the movie, and we have to create another character. And he was really great. He was cool about it. He was like, "I get it. You're right. What can we do?" And we started dialogue about what that is. And he's an extremely talented actor and such a sharp individual. So same with Ethan Hawke and Vince D'Onofrio. All these guys all bring insights that, you know, a good writer would welcome.
Yeah.
You know, and so that was really sort of and the story itself was just simplified to sort of what it is, right? Like these men who've grown up in violence and have nothing to show for it are and wondering about their legacies and things like that are now going to, you know, do something for people was very simple and thematically fun to work with. And so that's how that worked. And I guess I spent 20 weeks on the set and in pre-production and working with all the actors and rehearsing. And again, I had worked with Antoine on Equalizer. So we had a shorthand. And I could ask, you know, so I wasn't writing something he wouldn't shoot and things like that. So that's how that came to be.
Is it something is it usually like this, the work with the actor that you're coming to their houses?
Very, very unusual.
Okay.
I don't know why. I think it's because I started as a director, so I was very collaborative anyway. And I wrote and directed, and I understand that anybody's idea is better. And so I never came off as someone who you didn't want around because I would be precious about things. I also love actors. I think it started with John Huston on Annie. He was very, very, he never blocked a scene until the actors did. And I asked him why. And he said, well, that's what they do. That's why we hired them. They're smarter than me about it's all they do is their character. So if they don't want to stand there, they want to do this, I think their instincts are probably better than mine. So that sort of led into my idea about telling a story or writing a character. What do they bring to? What do they want to do? That's probably more authentic than maybe what I thought.
Yeah.
It's not different. It's just maybe different and better or more authentic than maybe what I said did. So things like that.
Yeah, I like this way to
I'll
see
give you a
that.
good example was that on 16 Blocks, I had written this character, and Mos Def, who was almost impossible to get, really, I wrote him a letter, and he loved the word savant that I used in it in describing his character. And when we were rehearsing, there was a scene in the car where Bruce Willis's character refers to him as a rat. And the dialogue was pretty good. The dialogue was like, if it looks like a rat and walks like a rat, and he goes, it could be a vole. They look like rats, but they're not right. It was a whole thing. And he said to
Yeah.
me, no black guy would ever accept the word rat.
Mm.
It would be a whole different scene. That is not something you would ever use and say to somebody. And that was a perfect example of someone who knew more than I did.
Yeah.
As much as I liked the dialogue, it was not authentic and not authentic to him. So we rewrote that and he played it his way, which was more, authentic. So that's sort of the process that I think a lot of writers don't get that
Mm.
get to
Yeah.
do that. But I think it's important to think that, right? It's
Yeah.
important to understand that what would they, you're asking somebody that's all they do is play this character. And they're going to come at it from their own perspective. And sometimes you just have to, and if you're a good collaborator, they'll ask you to work with them or they'll ask you to fix things. On Equalizer, Melissa Leo had a problem when I had never met her before. She loved the script. She came to do it. I met her on the set. We talked and she goes, this scene I'm in, I know I have to do all the exposition, which he did, right? Which is always a terrible thing for an actor to do. But she goes, I just wish it could be a little bit more familiar, like I know him a little bit better and I would do it in shorthand. And I thought, oh, that's great. So I went that night at the hotel, I rewrote the scene and I sent it to her. And she was thrilled and really more than thrilled, like surprised. And I thought, boy, I bet you they don't get this sometimes, that they don't, they fight these things and they shouldn't have to. So
Yeah.
I think that the one thing I would tell anybody is that, what you write is sort of a blueprint anyway, for actors, for directors, for production designers. It's all you're telling is your story stays intact and the colors are mixed maybe a little differently. But if you do your job right, it comes out as the movie that you wrote.
Yeah, I love that because it's like a relationship that you have also with the actors as a screenwriter, and
Yes.
not only the director with the actors.
I learned a lot on 16 Blocks because Dick Donner, who was directing it, we were kind of close. And so I went to read with all the actors coming into audition. So I was reading my work with them. And I remember there was one scene that they were reading that sounded terrible. And I kept thinking the actors were terrible, but it was my work that wasn't very good. It was very stilted or it was impossible to act, right? And it took me that to go, oh, that doesn't sound good. In my head, it sounds like this, but out loud, it sounds like that. And you have to fix it. So it was a good lesson to go, sometimes you're just a little off and you need another voice to help you.
Yeah. You have to adapt.
And not to be afraid of it, just to be embracing of it,
Yeah, because at my level, I'm like very scared of reading some of my screenwriting with some actors and some people.
Don't be
I don't know if
afraid.
it
In
will
fact,
work.
don't be afraid. I think the best thing to do is when you have a script, scene, scripts or whatever, to sit at a table and read them out loud and put actors in them and listen. I would do that. I would turn my chair around so I don't see anybody and I would just listen to the movie. And sometimes you go, ooh, that sounds terrible, whatever. I imagined this or whatever. And sometimes they don't get it and you say, well, try it like that. But it's a very good lesson for you to do that, is to put yourself in a position to be vulnerable and listen to actors you like and you respect, read your work out loud and you can adjust on the fly, add a line, take a line, whatever. So it's a good process.
I will definitely try next time.
Yes. Okay.
And is it a thing, because I heard that you were on the set also for with Antoine Fuqua. Is it a thing for a screenwriter to be on the set? Are you
Mostly not.
Yeah.
Mostly not. I think there are guys, first of all, it's hard to be on a set because they're not always doing what you wrote. So they're shorthanding it, or they're this, or they decide they don't need that or whatever. So I know why they don't want writers on the set. I think because I started writing scripts, and I don't write scripts anymore. I write movies. I call them movies.
Mhm.
There's a difference, right? There's a difference in a script, which is a thing, and a movie in which you
Mm.
read it as a visual thing, and it's a movie, and you go, oh, I want to see that, and then you have to
Yeah.
work some more in deep, and all that stuff. But um, I think because I started writing for directors and creative producers rather than studios, because
Yeah.
the studios, they just turn the script over to somebody else, and then everything is based on someone else's opinion, and the marketing department or that director, whatever. And then you're forgotten. But when
Mm.
you work with a creative producer or a director, and you share your thoughts and work and feelings with him, and he or she shares them back, you end up you're making the same movie. And then when you have an actor come in, you're the person the director counts on to help massage this, so it's right for them, as opposed to somebody new who has 15 new ideas that takes the thing
Mm.
down the road. So you have to be that person be the collaborator with your director, because ultimately the director is the pilot of the movie, and he's flying the plane, and you're just a passenger. And
Yeah.
when I'm on the set, I'm only there in case there's a problem, a question, or if I see something that's going to fuck up a
Mm.
scene down the road. And
Yeah.
sometimes they don't care. Sometimes they say, look, we'll deal with that, whatever. But I'm there to say it, remind them or whatever. The best time for a writer to be on a movie is in pre-production.
Yeah.
That is when everything gets changed. That's when budgets, they don't have a location. They got to get rid of a part, and you have to combine two parts to one. And if you're not there, line producers do it, and other people do it,
Okay.
and they don't think big story. So I think it's something that's happened to me. I think because of the way I began, I was very on a set of I don't know what Annie cost, but at the time, that most expensive movie ever. And watching these people make a movie, and watching the writer talk to the director, and watching this, and being a director, and then working with directors and thinking, I'm an asset for you,
Yeah.
and by the way, you're also doing the director's notes as you go. When he reads it, he goes, it would be great. What if we set that in a cave instead of on a thing? And you go, oh, and we could do this. And I go, okay, that's
Mm.
that's your job as a screenwriter.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And now, yeah, you've written so all three films in the Equalizer trilogy, which is quite rare for screenwriter to have the opportunity to continue to the writing with the same characters across films. What is your relationship with these films and with the character of Robert McCall?
It's interesting. But first, I was offered the job of writing an Equalizer movie 5 years earlier by another well-known, very famous producer. And when he sent me the material, um, uh, I thought it was a TV show. I said, well, it's a television show, and I passed. And
Okay.
then a couple years later, Todd Black and Jason Blumenthal at Escape Artists sent me the same package, basically, and said, what do you think about this as a movie? And I said, it's a TV show. And then they said, well, we're talking with Denzel. We make movies with Denzel, and he would read the script without an offer, right? Which is kind of like, wow. So I thought,
Yeah.
oh, that changed everything for me in my thought process. And I thought, well, what if I just threw out the entire television show, and
Yeah.
I only kept the title and the conceit that he was going to help people, but not the way they did in the TV show, not a spy or anything else, just a guy. And so I began to create this wish fulfillment character, I guess I would call it, right? He's the guy that we wish we could do that, and we wish he lived next to us, and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I thought that, and it went through a whole process of development with these producers. Much too much to talk about now, but really interesting stuff, and where I threw out 35 pages that they didn't want to throw out because I thought it was the wrong movie in the second act. I said, we're making the wrong movie here. The first hour of this movie is great. The second is turning into something else. And it ended up being exactly word for word the movie that you see, right?
Yeah.
But Denzel read it, he loved it, he wanted to make it. And then so I started to work with him. And that was my relationship with him. And then Antoine came aboard and we hit it off right away. And I was there for scouting locations and talking about the scenes and all that stuff and how we're going to do that. And at the Russian room, in the first room, I wrote exactly how you see it, but I never imagined anyone could actually film it. I just thought it's a really cool way to write action in a script because action in a script is boring. So I wrote it in, through his eyes and things disappear and all that other stuff. They'll never be able to film it, but it's good. It's cool. And he filmed it. He figured it
I
out.
did it.
He did. So I ended up on the set and I ended up on on scouts and things. And it was just sort of a team. We became a team. Denzel, Antoine, the producers, and myself. And I think because the first movie tested very well, they immediately ordered a second movie. And Denzel wasn't really keen to do a sequel. He'd never done one. And but they had to try, right? But I already knew what it was. I already knew what all three were, actually. So I kind of knew what they were. The first one was finding his purpose. The second one was making peace with his past and his life. And the third was finding his place, right? That was the three movies I had in my head. And the movie did well. Denzel really loved the conceit of the second movie and the kid and the whole thing. And so he signed on to do it. And that was rare. He's never done one. And that did well, did better than the first one. And then they wanted a third one. And I thought, well, I know we're not staying in the States. We're going international. And Antoine always wanted to. In fact, we had an ending in the first one where he was coming out of an airport in Europe, on a thing before titles, and they didn't let us do that. But so we ended up. So anyway, those were the movies, and I think it's just because it was successful and the team stayed intact. Same director, same writer, same producers, same actor. It was It's not dissimilar to Bourne. They had not the first one, but the subsequent two with the same sort of team. Because it's working, I think, and they got the DNA of it. So, so it's just again very fortunate that it was all these people, and the relationships I have with them. So,
and then you write a character like this through three films, three movies. Do you want? I don't know. You do you write our history, or do you want to follow
I
him?
wrote his backstory and who he is and where he was before we first meet him. And again, another trick, or not a trick, but a thing I learned was, you don't really know his story. There's no really reveal of what happened to his wife, what he did in, as a U.S. government, black op, whatever he is. We don't even know what he is. And I kept writing it, I kept putting it in the script and I kept moving it because every time I learned about it, I felt the movie deflated. So until I just pushed it right out of the movie. And I remember at the test screening, they asked about it, and the test audience loved the fact I didn't know, that their imagination was better than any facts I could have given them. So, those are the things I think I like about it, is that, he evolved. He was this guy struggling in the beginning, and then he found his calling, so to speak. And but it was personal in the second one. It was his only friend that knew him and supported him. And so it was a different sort of thing, while equalizing for a couple other people. And then the third one really became that bullet in the third one. I don't know if you saw it, but when he shot in the third one, That's like the universe shooting him and saying you're going on the wrong, if you're going down the wrong road. And that thematic of you're where you're supposed to be and becoming part of the fabric of this community, which he never really had. He was never part of a community. He was kind of a Ronin loner kind of guy.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, because he couldn't do anything else, right? And he had to be
Yeah.
there to recover. Was sort of what I always imagined, like the gift to himself. So he kind of equalized his own life, really, right?
Yeah.
As much as he equalized for the town and protected the town from the mafia guys, it was his town. It was for him. So that was sort of, always my feeling is how I would like this guy to end up is to be happy, you
Yeah.
know, and to find his place again, you know. So
I love this the travel of the character, yeah, that you bring it.
yeah, it's fun
Yeah.
to imagine it over several films. You don't have to rush,
Yeah.
you don't have to cram a lot of stuff in. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. And at the beginning you said that if it was a TV show, you didn't want to write it. Why? Because I
Well, it was
know
very
sorry,
well.
in France we have the thing with the television and the cinema and the movie, and it's very, I don't know, maybe less now, but at the time it was two different things. And
Yes.
so I don't know
Well, it
if it
wasn't
was
so
for that.
much, yeah, it wasn't so much that, it was that the conceit of the TV show was I meet somebody. I think in the TV show, he put an ad in the newspaper, like if you need help to call me, right? And people call him, and every show he'd meet with somebody, they'd have a problem, and by the end of the show, he'd fix it, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
how many times can you do that over and over in a movie where I just didn't know how that was the conceit of the show, right?
Mm.
And I thought, well, I don't know how you repeat this over and over again. What I learned was you did it backwards. So you took the first equalizing sequence, which was the Russians and the young girl, and you see it from beginning to end,
Mm.
right? The second
Yeah.
equalizing sequence was his friend at Home Depot where the cops burned his mother's store. We didn't see any of that, right? We just saw the result of that, which was he beats up the cops and he exposes their corruption and they give her the money back and the kid gets back to work. So we saw the second half of it. And the
Mhm.
last one, you didn't see any of it. The girl got her ring taken by a robber in the store, and you never saw anything. You just saw him take a sledgehammer, and you saw the ring back in the drawer. So it was like shortening the idea, but the oddly the feeling of the third one was the highest rated one in an audience because the joy of her getting her mother's ring back. They in their imagination knew what he went and did and to get it back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you sort of go, okay, I solved that problem of doing too many equalizing things,
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things you have to figure out. And that's what originally why I thought it's a TV show. It's like problem,
Yeah.
you know, fixing and resolution, three things. That's a lot of stuff to juggle more than once in a movie.
Yeah, I understand totally. It can be very repetitive and
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
for the episodes, yeah.
Yeah.
And throughout your career, one name comes up quite often. We talked about him, Antoine Fuqua.
Mhm.
How would you define your collaboration relationship with him more than other director?
Yeah, we're friends and we both love movies and we both are movie buffs. We love cinema. We watch movies together. We call each other about movies. Did you see this movie? What if we did that like in that movie? When we did Magnificent Seven, we watched Westerns.
Yeah,
We watched Clint Eastwood. We watched this. We watched, we just watched all different sort of things to inspire us. So we hit it off right then and there about that we both love movies and we both love telling stories. Um, and I think that he appreciates my openness and collaboration, and I the same thing. He can take a sequence and do something magical to it that's elevates it. A
yeah,
perfect example is uh, I think and sometimes there are little things, right? Sometimes there are things like the corkscrew in the first one. That was a shrimp cocktail fork in my script. but the corkscrew was better, right? It's more interesting, right? Another thing was the chase through Home Depot was exactly as scripted, except he caused the sprinklers to come on. And it became a whole visual, beautiful sequence that made it even richer and more interesting and cinematic than I had written. So it's those kind of things that we check each other on, and he's able to take something and then like take that idea and just paint it in a way that you know that's his gift. And you just give it to him and say, here, and he takes it to a whole nother level.
Yeah.
So
That's
we enjoy it. We get on the phone all the time. He's like, oh, God damn it, I miss working with you, man. Let's do something else. Let's find something else, you know. So I'd say that's our relationship. It's
okay.
pretty
Well,
close.
that's awesome because sometimes it feels like the relationship between the screenwriter and the director is not very good. We can feel it through the
Yes,
movies. And yeah,
yes.
it's
Well,
really
there's some that don't. Again, it's a director's medium, and if you don't understand that, you're in trouble. The idea is to get to a place where everybody's making the same movie. It might be better, it might be a little different, it may have a different tone or whatever, but it's the same movie you wrote, and there's no getting around that.
yeah,
You know, the third movie is darker than my script. You know, McCall's in a darker place than I sort of had him, but I think it really works well. And so that's a instinct of Denzel and Antoine, and they carried it through the whole movie, and it didn't interrupt the richness of the palette of the rest of the movie at all. So it
no,
balanced it great. Again, the violence in these movies are more violent than my script, and it's good. I didn't know if it would work, but it worked better than I thought. You know,
yeah,
I imagine I was worried. I was like, this is graphic, this is violent. But but that's part of why it's great, I think, why the movies really work, because it's not fake.
yeah,
It's not movie violence, it's real. You know, he
yeah,
doesn't fuck around, this guy. So and I love it. And I think that was another lesson I learned from Antoine. He goes, no, this will work. It's very bloody, you know.
yeah. I remember I was really surprised the first time in the first one when I saw this type of scene, and
Yeah.
really enjoyed also for this type of. It was never free. It was also in the story very
Yes.
good.
Yep.
So yeah, I really like this movie. So I aspire to become a screenwriter myself. I'd like to know about your writing process. How do you
Mhm.
go for the first ideas to a final version of your script? Do you have any particular techniques? Do you share your scripts for feedback sometimes?
Yes. Well, my favorite part of the process is the beginning, right? Where everything is available to you and there's no boundaries or roadblocks at this point. You're just kind of throwing everything up in the air and see. I usually have a first act in my head, right? And a character
Okay.
and a world, right? And I kind of have an ending, you know, some version of an ending, right? Good or bad or whatever that is, I know it goes there. And the rest of it sort of is the character's journey. And also my process is um, not to outline anything, right? So I like to write the movie as if I was watching it. And if I know that the next scene will be between him and her on the bus stop, it's probably not a scene I should write, because I've seen that scene and that's where it's supposed to go. And your job as a screenwriter ultimately is when someone reads it, they can't stop turning the page. That's my goal. It's like when I'm writing, you better not be able to stop and go, I'll stop here and pick it up later. You can't. I kind of figure out a way to write it in a way in which it's unfolding like a movie and unexpected. And I'm not sure what's going to happen. I also feel it's good to surprise yourself as a writer, right? Because you're a screenwriter, you watch movies, you went to film school, you've seen so much, right? The last thing
Yeah.
you want to do is write something and say, well, and I think there's a danger to writing towards something. That's the other thing.
Mm.
So if you say, okay, I know they have to have a big fight in the police station, and you
Yeah.
start writing everything to get to the police station, you're handcuffing yourself in terms of your characters and their behaviors and things like that. So I got an idea there's a scene like that in there, and maybe it does not in the police station, maybe it's in the police car, I don't know. But I'm just kind of going to see where this takes me. And if I'm surprised, um, then I think it's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love that moment where you're like, I've seen this before, and I know where this is going, and I don't really want to write it because blah blah blah, and then you just go,
Mm.
So that's my process. I write, and I would encourage everybody to. Uh, I write about 5 drafts before I turn it in. So
Mm.
my first draft is gone through it 5 times. And that means I've given it to producers, I've given it to people I trust, to make sure I'm not going off any rails or there's something that's confusing or I think it's great and they think it sucks. Um, so I'm going through this and then I'm writing it and I'm rewriting it. And I usually write the first act 3, 4, 5 times to make sure, because I
Okay.
don't think if you get the first act wrong,
Mm.
you're wrong the rest of the way. So hone that down, get that down, and then the middle of the film is where most screenplays fall apart, right? They
Yeah.
kind of get to the end and a lot of conveniences or things like that happen, and that's where people go, oh, really, how did he get that, or how did he do that, or whatever, and just to get there. So that's where you got to be really smart. And so I think those
Mm.
are the times where you really just go, I know people are reading 35 pages of my screenplay and it's all good. And I'm getting to this place where I gotta, he's gonna get on the road and they're gonna be bored. They're gonna want to get ahead to see where he ends up. So how do I stop that?
Mm.
What would make them
Yeah.
keep reading, keep watching? Um, it's um it's an art into itself, but it's also a storyteller's thing. It's like
Mm.
if you read Dickens and if you read even Elmore Leonard, if you read any kind of really good writer, you don't really know where it's going, or you think you're going to know, and then something else happens. And
Mm.
so I find if you outline it, I find I get bored writing it. Like I've already figured it out, and I'm like, all right, I got to write the scene where they do this, and they don't seem to flow.
Mm.
So that's my process. I started out outlining Vamp, like scene for scene for scene for scene for scene, and then going back and putting dialogue, 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 dialogue in it. And by the time I was finished, I was like, I don't even want to direct it. It's like it's already finished. It's like, so
Yeah.
I'm kind of like it's a very mundane process. So that's
Mm.
my process. Some people like cards and
Yeah.
picking out their movies. And you could do that, I guess, if you do the same process, which is I don't want to uh I need to surprise myself. So even when I'm carding out the movie, do not feel like I just want to get to the big set piece and then she's kidnapped and
Yeah.
that it's harder to do that if you're just writing actual scenes and not
Mm.
just going, oh, and then this happens and this happens and
Mm.
then they kidnap her and then he does that and he does that. It's hard for me.
Mm. Yeah, for me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you have the first idea, and I'm always trying to find another way because it's the first idea that came up in your mind. But you
Yes.
have, if you change the place or just an object, or some things, or maybe remove the dialogues, and it's more about the look and yeah,
Yeah.
I think it can change everything.
It can. And again, you have to sit with it and then you put it on a paper and I'm always imagining someone reading it. I'm always very aware that someone is going to have to sit and read this.
Yeah.
So the words I choose, how little words I choose, or when I choose to use the words are important because
Mm.
that's all. Someone told me once, early in my career, oh, I know what it was. I shot some test footage on the movie Scalper that turned out just a ticket with Andy. We shot it. We just went out and shot some scenes and improv and stuff like that and cut it together.
Yeah.
We showed it to the studio and the studio flipped out and they're like, wait, I didn't even think the movie looked like, what do you mean? I imagined the movie a different way.
Mm.
And the guy said, I'll never read a script the same way again. And I thought, no, no, you read the script the right way. I didn't write it the right way, right? So I didn't make you see what I saw. And so he told me, because imagine your script sitting on a desk with 20 other scripts. That's what they do. They get a bunch of scripts. They don't do it today. It's all digital. But in the old days, they'd have a pile of scripts they'd have to get through on the weekend. And your script's in there somewhere. And they're reading script after script. And they don't want to read every fucking line. And they want to get through. And they want to know, is this any good? 20 pages, not good. They put it away. So imagine somebody taking the time, an actor, right, an investor, a producer, or somebody, the studio, whatever, sitting down and actually reading your work. And they should not be able to stop reading until the end. Right? They should want to know, they should be invested in your character or characters. They don't want them to die, they don't want them to get kidnapped or whatever it is. They want them to succeed. Will they, won't they, whatever that is, and they want to know. And your job is to stop them from trying to jump to page 80 to find out. Your job is to basically go, oh, where'd that come from? Who's that? How? I didn't know, all the way to the end. So if you imagine someone reading it just like you read it, and I'm sure you read screenplays, and you get to a place and you're like, okay, move on, hurry up, So I think that's the other thing I think I'd encourage writers to do. It's writing is so hard, and it's thankless. Most of what you write, as professional screenwriters, do not get made. I mean, I've gotten lucky in the last 10 years or so. Most of them got made, but before that, none of them got made, right? You're like, and until I realized I should work for filmmakers and I should be talking filmmaker language. Just imagine that someone's going to take an hour to read your work, and you when you're reading it and looking at it, I know you see it in your head, but do they see the same thing, right? And do they feel? It's interesting. Denzel pointed out something we would sit in the production office and go through the scripts every day. And one day he said, "What's this?" I go, he says this. I go, how do I act that? Right? I looked at it, and there's no way to act it. It's an internal description, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And I finally, I was embarrassed, right? I'm like, oh, I don't know. And I realized, I know why that's there. That's not for you. That's for the studio. That's for the studio to understand the feeling of this scene and what you're feeling. You can act it, and you can say nothing or do anything, but there's a shot of her and the girl and the thing, and it'll all play. But they don't see the shots or anything else. I have to make them feel. So I write in this internal thing where he's and he goes, okay, well, okay. So that's part of, you realize that's part of, there's two screenplays, the one that they read and decide to make, and the one that you actually shoot. There's two, right? Then you can go in and put the interior, exteriors, and I don't use those a lot, right? I just, I don't use, standard stuff because they're hard to read.
Yeah, I don't I don't use it neither, but
No.
I can feel and for Vamps, did you do finally the way that the studio wanted it, or
Yeah. I mean, not only did I outline it, then put it into script form, but I storyboarded pretty much the whole movie. And again, that was very, it was, I don't know, it was probably $3 million in 28 days and all nights. It was crazy. And it was like, and music, numbers and dances and nighttime shooting and shit. So, no money and everything else. So I had storyboards for everything. And again, as a creator, doing the storyboards and doing it, I was directing the movie. And then I actually had to go out and do it again, with all the things that could go wrong and people having to do. So that probably led to my feeling is that writing and directing is hard for me.
Yeah, I can understand you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And I saw that you said in an interview that I think action is one of the hardest things to write and to be readable. I would love to know why. How does one go about writing an action script? Because I can only imagine the amount of fight scene descriptions it has to have, or perhaps it's the opposite? Could you please say it?
Well,
How
describing any
you?
action is boring. It's just, and I've had the displeasure of being told by the head of the studio that he calls it P and K. I said, "What's that?" He goes, "Punching and kicking." So when I get to a paragraph, I just think they're punching and kicking each other. And I'm like, I
Okay.
spent like 3 days writing this thing, right? And he's goes punching it. So, but that's how they think, right? A big
Mm,
block of description of things. First of all, number one, it's more important to feel something than it is to describe some giant thing, right?
mm,
Uh,
yeah.
uh, Two, so it's I kind of tend to leave out actual physical things,
Okay.
right? I pick up half of things. Like I would say, like I don't know. I'm trying to think of something, but the punch hit him below the eye, breaking an orbital bone.
Mm,
Through the tears, he does the. It's a feeling. It's like you don't feel the pain or the thing. It is just white noise, right? And you just want to go, okay, so they fight for a while and then he kills him or something, right?
mm,
What's the art of that? What's the thing? I think it's more poetic as is how I write it. I think I write it more like that, like poetry,
mm,
where there's breathing things and it's one of my favorite ones was in Equalizer 2. He didn't shoot it this way, but he was sitting at a table on the train, and the guys got up to beat him up, and he never left his chair. And I believe I wrote something like, "What follows is breathless and this in its compactness and brutality. Um, the sound of bones breaking, bodies dropping like dead birds and everything
mm.
else. And when it's done, the teacup had moved only an inch, something like that, right?
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
okay, so you understood what happened. It was cool. It sounded cool. And ultimately speaking, there's going to be stunt guys and actors and everybody else creating a whole sequence for you, right?
Choreography.
Right. So now he did it at the bar and he used the coffee pot and the thing. It was a whole nother thing with a knife and a gun and a thing. But ultimately speaking, that was the scene and it was cool. And I didn't want to describe every blow and everything because everybody's read
Mm,
everything, right? And so you write it poetically, write it like how it feels.
okay.
You know,
Yeah.
what happens, the next thing happens in half a second and he's
Mm,
down. I don't know, well, he'll get down there somewhere. But I understand as a reader, it's like something brutal happened, the guy's down and the sequence is over. And my guy's cool because he's not, his shirt's not ruffled or whatever, right?
okay.
I think that's the best way to approach that kind of stuff and
Okay. Yeah.
stay away from details.
It's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Because if, for example, you have so a lot of fight scenes in the movie, and you have the
Mhm.
last fight scene with the boss or the main enemy, is
Mhm.
it different? Do you have to describe more of it because
No,
it's
no.
the same?
Describe feeling. Like if you got to the end of an opera, you got to an end of this thing, right? Look at the end of Equalizer 3. It's sort of operatic, right?
Yeah.
They didn't even shoot the scene where Denzel makes him eat the drugs, right? The irony of making him eat his own thing and then saying, but what is follows is an operatic thing of a guy trying to make it to a hospital where he's never going to make it, and
Yeah.
it's you're killing the bad guy in a way that's ironic and poetic and justified. Um, the rest is cinema, right? So you don't need to write 3 pages that it went on for minutes and minutes, but it's probably a paragraph in the script.
Yeah.
So it's a feeling, right? Like are you satisfied? Does the guy, are you satisfied with the result? And that's
Mm.
really your question, right? Like, I never like killing the guy in the first Equalizer with the nail gun, right?
Yeah, that's
I
true.
wanted him
Yeah.
to suffer for a long time. I didn't want him to like shot, and I know one bullet will kill you. One bullet, even in your arm, will kill you. So I thought this is more interesting, and I get to enjoy the satisfaction of this guy knowing he's beaten and still doesn't know who he is, right? In the rain, in the water, and all that other stuff. So that to me is the satisfaction of that. Like the guy just didn't get shot and was dead. You stage it in a way where it's not what's the worst thing you could do in a movie, which is have your bad guy and your good guy talk for 3 minutes and tell each other everything before he kills them or something, right? It never happens. So you need to but the satisfaction of that is important. So how do you do that and show that? That's your job, right? So the reader goes, fucking A, that guy fucking loved that guy's dying or whatever, right? And not the specifics of it, but just he suffered, he knew why he died, he know he got caught, or whatever the things you need to impart. Yeah.
Yeah. I love the fact that we have to ask ourselves all these questions to decide what is good or not for the movie. I
Yeah.
really like that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So thank you for your responses. We
Sure.
arrived at the end of our interview. I will just take 5 minutes for the quick Proust questionnaire.
Okay.
So are you ready for that?
I'm ready.
Uh, so question one, what is the quality you prefer in a person?
Loyalty.
Two, what do you appreciate most in your friends?
Um, Sincerity.
Three, what is your main flaw?
Uh, my main flaw is catastrophic thinking.
Yeah. Four, what do you hate the most?
Uh, Bullies.
Five, what is your favorite thing to do outside of work?
Exercise.
Six, what's the most enjoyable thing about your job?
Working with other creative people.
Seven, do you have a dream of happiness?
Yes. You want to know what it
Yeah,
is?
yeah, in little words, yeah.
My dream of happiness is a body of work I'm proud of, a family that is healthy and nearby.
Thank you. Eight, who are your favorite author in literature and in the film industry?
My favorite author in literature is Charles Dickens. Uh, in um, in my industry, oh, that's a tough one. I would say, yeah, it's a tough one. Hmm. I don't know. There's so many. Everyone has so many little things. I'll pick one. I would say Ernest Lehman.
Okay. Nine, what are your favorite heroes in fiction? Heroes in fiction.
Heroes in fiction.
Yeah.
Hmm. Atticus Finch. Um, hmm. You're talking about literature fiction or any fiction?
Any fiction. Yeah.
Any fiction.
As you want.
John Book for Witness was a great character for me. Uh, yeah, those two. Yeah.
Okay. I like it.
Yeah.
10, who are your favorite artists or composers?
Ah, my favorite artists. In any artist form, I assume, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Well, I think uh, that's a good one. I love I love the work of the Beatles. I love Springsteen in terms of music, in terms of lyrics, and capturing um, fictional real life heroes. Um, uh, I love Edward Hopper. I love the what his paintings evoke. So those.
Thank you. 11, who are your favorite historical figures?
History.
Historical figures.
Oh, historical figures. Uh, hmm. Lincoln. Um, Marcus Aurelius. Um, uh, hmm, who else? That's it.
Okay, that's already good.
Right.
12. What gift of nature would you like to have?
Like
Special ability.
a special ability.
Yeah, something.
I think would be to always always find the brighter side of things, even in the darkest of times.
Yeah, can relate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
13. Which faults inspire the most indulgence in you?
Anyone who takes accountability for their actions, be it wrong or wrong-headed, if they take accountability, I think I would have a tendency to be forgiving.
Okay, thank you. And last one, what advice would you generally give to young people about career paths, opportunities, success, and failures?
Okay, this is one easy. The first thing I would say is read a lot, right? Read and watch and know what inspires you and what touches you. And also have a voice that you want to speak to others. Um, uh, the second part is then you should write and keep writing, right? So that all goes hand in hand. For you, I would say just keep reading people's screenplays, keep reading the screenplays that got made, the screenplays that didn't get made. Why, finding language you like. I found great language in the Coen Brothers screenplays, and M. Night Shyamalan doesn't use any description in anything, and yet I understand the whole movie. So I pick up all these things from other people. William Goldman wrote in non-screenplay form, so it's like that taught me I don't have to. So find your voice and what lets you tell a story. Imagine you telling a story in a room around a table, and you want to tell this whole story, and you don't want anyone to look away. That's how you imagine your writing. And the second thing is, it's never about you, it's about others. So when people don't like your things or they reject them or thing, you cannot take that to heart for yourself. That's about them. You can learn. Please always learn. What did you learn? What did the journey teach you? Why didn't they? This was the first question I asked everyone when they rejected my screenplays. Why? Why didn't you like it? And sometimes they're stupid and they're wrong. But the other times they say things like, and I just go, oh, I won't do that again. I get that. I should blah, blah, blah. So don't be afraid to fail. You will, more times than you'll succeed. But the whole idea is that really you're finding your voice, and eventually, you'll know that when people respond, it's responding to you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it was a perfect end.
Okay,
Thank you
yeah.
so much. Thank you for your time, and thank you for answering all of our questions.
You're welcome.
So we are good, and have a nice day.
You
Thank you so
too.
much.
You too. Thank you so much. This was really
Thank
fun.
you.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.